All right, welcome back to the Ottawa studios of Inside My Canoe Head. I am your host, Dr. D. Thanks for joining us again. Today we are talking about preparedness on the move, mobility preparedness. Sit back, grab yourself your favorite beverage. Let's get at her. Who does not love a great guitar riff periodically? Thanks again for joining us this week at Inside My Canoe Head as we start week number 6 of the 10 weeks of practical preparedness. This episode, we're going to do a quick recap of the first 5, what we went through. We're going to talk about preparedness on the move, the practical applications. We're going to talk about considerations for local, interstate, and international travel, how to frame your mind, considerations that you may want to adopt, and generally how to look through the lens of preparedness while you rock an incredible life, chase your dreams, have the adventures, travel to the other side of the world. There is no reason whatsoever that you should curtail mobility plans simply because the world's chaotic. No, my friends, you adopt preparedness and it facilitates you traveling wherever the heck you want to. So thanks again for joining us. Listen, we appreciate all your feedback that continues to come in. Drop over to our website, www.insidemycanoehead.ca. There's a button down the bottom, a link where you can just drop me a line at jeff@preparednesslabs.ca, which is our parent company. There's also a link there that if you really enjoy what you hear at Inside My Canoe Head, you can buy me a coffee. It's $5 Canadian, a lot less American, or you can do none of that and just tell your friends about us. But thanks again. We talk about practical preparedness here in this 10-week series, and the purpose of the 10-week series is, if you follow us, we're on season number 9. Now, season number 6, 7, and 8 were really deep dives into the theoretical framework of preparedness, right? We know it has nothing to do with top 10 lists of things you should buy, 15 things you should have to prepare to hoard or to barter after the collapse. Like all of that junk that you see on YouTube has nothing to do with preparedness and everything to do with fear-mongering. If you're interested in the actual theory of preparedness, we have a bunch of seasons dedicated to that, talking about not only the practical application, but the theoretical framework that's behind it. This season was all about, let's launch into how do we translate that theory into practice? Because remember, preparedness is not acquired through the acquisition of goods and services, right? You can't buy your way and you can't stockpile your way to preparedness. And people will argue with me viciously online about the fact that, 2 years of food in your basement is preparedness. I'm like, no, dude, not at all. None whatsoever. You got a wildfire come through there, I want you to fill your backpack on a short notice of your 2 years of food and get it out. Like, we could go on and forever. It's not, right? Preparedness is a lifestyle. It's not a stockpile. Preparedness is free, but it is an investment of your time and effort. It involves strategic planning. It involves in strategic thinking. It involves in execution and going through a number of probable and possible scenarios, looking at risk profiles and a whole bunch of other things that set you up for incredible success. So we started off the 10 weeks of practical preparedness back a couple of weeks ago, and we started off with the most likely. So we spent a week talking about what is the most likely event that will occur to you that will cause disruption in how you intend to run your normal life. That is a extended power outage, right? We know that the power is probably the one thing we depend upon the most. When the power goes down, it has cascading effects to a whole bunch of other areas of our life, but it is likely the most common, and it is the one that has the least impact, though it is a bit cheese off when it happens. We then transition in week number 2 to the most dangerous event in our minds, and based upon research done here at Preparedness Labs Incorporated and across the academic domain that supports emergency and disaster management, is an evacuation, by far. For a specific family, there is no greater threat to their continuity of existence, for lack of a better term, than an evacuation. And if you think about scenario planning and emergency management, people talk about scenarios for every identified hazard. You'll hear a term called a HIRA, which is a hazard identification and risk awareness. It is a risk assessment. It is something that public agencies will do, private companies will do. It's basically, I want to look around and see what possibly could go wrong and then understand the risk that's involved in it, right? And if you come up with a whole bunch of possible scenarios, the likely first turn is we need to come up with a contingency plan for every scenario. The difficulty with that is, and I'll bring my several decades military experience will tell you that multiple contingency plans leads you down a rabbit hole of planning, and it's the art of planning that is important, not the outcomes. And so what we look at here at Inside My Canoe Head, to make your life simple, to make preparedness as least complex as it can be, we look at it as a spectrum. If you can think of a spectrum of all the possible events that could happen to you and your family, think about from the most likely to the most dangerous, right? So we plan for both ends. One is the most likely, which is your power loss, and one of the most dangerous is an unintended evacuation from your residence, not knowing if it'll ever be there again. So everything that could happen in the middle is going to be covered largely by having a plan at the extremes. And that's the idea of using a continuum. And those are the first 2 weeks. And the reason we started off with those is bang, let's get you thinking about what you probably could. We're putting context. But the third part of what we refer to as your trifecta of preparedness plans is the initiation of opening that door to explain to you that preparedness is not about kits in your house. If you believe that kits and stockpiles in your house, you're only a baby step into the world of preparedness. Now, you could have some pretty amazing kits, don't get me wrong, but you're only thinking of the first little inch of preparedness when it's a mile deep. The third trifecta of preparedness plans is income loss, right? Because the loss of a principal income to a family can be just as disruptive and impactful as the house burning down. It's that serious. We've seen it over, every decade, every 8 to 12 years in a capitalistic environment. You have a recession, a downturn, prices spike, unemployment then rises. You have a spike in interest rates to deal with the inflation. People lose houses. This whole inflationary cycle comes around every 8 to 12 years. It's almost perfectly predictable. What we're dealing with right now was absolutely foretold by anybody who spent 5 cents. But everybody gets drunk on the Kool-Aid, right? Let's just buy a house, look at the low rates, everything. My job is wonderful. Practical preparedness is about the real world that you live in. Losing that income is horribly impactful to a family. So we dedicated an entire week to building the context that preparedness is not just kit and equipment in your house, right? Let's open that door. And when we start talking about the implications to you and your family of losing that income, you start to realize really, really quickly that preparedness has very little to do with non-perishable food in my house and flashlight and batteries and a radio, right? As important as you may think they are exceptionally tiny amount of what preparedness is all about. So that starts your context. When we moved into week 4, we started talking about your exposure to and your dependency on critical infrastructure. Now, here at Preparedness Labs Incorporated and this podcast Inside My Canoe Head, we've largely based our educational system that we recommend on the idea that you live in a technologically enabled, connected society. You rely on any number of systems to continue running every day to do what you want to do, right? To live the life that you are living, to do the things that you want to do, to rock an incredible life, to chase your dreams, to be that incredible person you are. You live in this technologically enabled society. You look around you. Think of all the systems when you got up this morning that you were absolutely guaranteed or you're just assuming would work. You flipped the switch, you flushed the toilet, you opened the fridge, you turned on the cell phone. Whatever it may be, if you think of all of these systems that are operated by somebody else, by some other corporation or public sector entity that you pay for through some system, it enables the whole whiz-bang to work. And what we talk about is if you frame, and this week was all about understanding the framework of preparedness. If you understand the framework of preparedness as being understanding your exposure to and dependency on the 10 sectors of critical infrastructure, then you start to see how you are intertwined with this modern technologically enabled world. Other than just looking around and looking at all the cool stuff and your cell phone in your pocket and you're listening to an incredible podcaster here, all of these things you just assume are there. But when you sit down and practically look step by step, and there's 10 sectors of critical infrastructure, we identify 4 elements of each. So you're looking at 40 touch points that we ask you to look at and then understand your dependency on the existence of that item and your exposure to it, which are 2 different things we talk about in that week. And when you do that, it puts an important framework on how structured your life is based upon the availability of a system that is outside of your control. Then we moved into the practical deliverable, which is developing your personal risk profile, right? We understand risk to be, in the simplest mathematical equation, to be the probability of an event multiplied by the severity of the outcome. You look at that, and that's your expression of risk. Now, everybody's risk frame is different. Your tolerance for risk is based solely on your personality and how you operate in this world. Your comfort with uncertainty, your ability to do things without having rock solid understanding of the potential outcomes of the event, your ability, do you skydive or do you wear a secondary restraint device in a car? You can see there's different types of people, how they interact. So one very similar level of risk could have significant different impacts on 2 different people. So understanding your risk profile independently is incredible as a deliverable. So now if you wrap these together, the first 3 weeks we build the context, we then demonstrated the framework, and now you have a deliverable. Now you're starting to understand that preparedness is not about the freaking kit and equipment and stockpiles and 10 most lists or whatever other junk that you see. It's very much deeper. And so far, how much money have you spent? Absolutely nothing. You're adopting a prepared life and you're not spending a freaking penny. You can't buy your way into preparedness. So this week we are switching to week number 6, preparedness on the move, because none of us live 100% of our time in our living room. We've heard concepts like EDC, everyday carry, bug out bags, car bags, airplane there's a YouTube video for all of this. So what is the practical considerations that you as an individual need to consider on the move? Number 1, let's talk local, right? The goal when you're local is always to return to your home, to your shelter in place plan, right? So we talk about, and if you love it, we've got all of these, we've got 242 episodes out on Buzzsprout, our podcast provider. We're available on all platforms. We've got it subject there. If you're looking for the summation, we do have an ebook for $7 on Amazon the links on our website at www.preparednesslabs.ca has all this together in one single place. If you're looking for a free download, drop over to our website, preparednesslabs.ca. There's a free 3-page download just for you that talks about a lot of what I'm doing here today. But what the book does is it offers you that one-place summation. You don't have to listen to 200-plus episodes of a podcast. You can go to one place and get it all together. But you have a shelter-in-place plan as part of your preparedness plan. It's like the foundation, right? You're able to provide your 6 animalistic requirements of food, water, shelter, health, safety, and security to you and those for whom you're responsible and the people that you love. And so your goal local from a preparedness frame is wherever you may be within the local area is whenever something significant happens, you're going to fall back to your home. Right? Your home is where your heart is. Your home is where your family is. It's where people feel safe. It's your community. It's your sense of place. It is illogical to advise people to go anywhere else, right? Because that's where people feel safe. And if you want to manage mental health well through a difficulty, a disruption, a disaster, an emergency, you want to keep people where they feel safe, and people feel safe in their home. So the first thing that you think about is transit options. How do I get home? Well, I'm driving my car. Car doesn't work anymore, right? How far am I from home? And this is where we start the discussion of local, right? I determine local that anything that I can walk home from. And so for me, the consideration really from a local event that causes me a disruption of my plan is I'm walking home, right? So all that I make sure that I do every day that I leave my home is wherever I'm going, I have what I need to walk home. Now, humans can go 3 days without water, 21 days without food. I'm not worried about carrying water and food for the trip, right? I can suck it up, princess. I can get myself home. I just need to be able to be environmentally safe from a shelter perspective. And the green-bearded Green Beret, the gray-bearded Green Beret is brilliant when he talks about his layered shelter system. And I give him credit every time because the man is brilliant. When he talks about shelter, he talks about your clothes as your first line of shelter, and they are. So just the only real consideration for local, to be frank, is wherever I am. I live in the city of Ottawa, Ontario, the capital of Canada, right? Has all kinds of seasons. We get 35, 37 degrees Celsius, above zero and below zero, depending on the time of year. So wherever I'm going and whatever I'm doing, I have the appropriate clothing, footwear, pants, jacket, hats, mitt, whatever it may be, to walk home. Doesn't mean I use them, I just carry them. So then I know wherever I am, bad things happen, I gotta get home. Well, I'm gonna walk home, right? The worst case scenario, I have to walk home, but I think of transit options. If my car breaks down and I live in a one-car household, so I can't call somebody to drive down and pick, how am I gonna get home? Well, I'll get an Uber, right? Do I have my Uber on my phone? Is my phone charged? Right? These are little things and considerations, right? It's really not a big deal to get bent out of shape locally. Just think, if I'm in my city, in my community, I'm in the city of Ottawa, wherever I may be in the city of Ottawa, I know how to get home, right? I know what roads to walk. I know what transit routes to take. I don't need to pull out my phone and determine when I'm in the east end or the west end or the south end or the north end, which transit route is the right one. I just know it. Right? It's, again, how much money has it cost me? Absolutely zero. But I know how to get around this city, right? Whenever I need to. I know where taxi stands are, blah, 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 right? It's just preparation and planning for when you travel around. Your only other consideration is what do you consider for an EDC, an everyday carry? Now, there's actually some really great YouTube channels on EDC. So I live in Canada. We don't carry firearms, thank God. Now, I know that my American friends may have a different perspective on that. That's fine. And by the way, I'm a proud firearm owner. I'm a hunter. I'm a veteran. I love firearms. I love shooting. I just don't carry one around during the day, right? So I literally carry a small Victorinox Swiss Army knife that my kids bought me, and I carry a small flashlight. And that's my EDC. I mean, your wallet and your telephone are just standard things that everybody carries. But as an EDC, I only carry 2 items, right? Which is the small Victorinox Swiss Army knife. It just has so many gadgets that help you out of various different things. And the flashlight is great because every once in a while you got to see where you go. And why am I going to kill my cell phone battery, a very valuable asset, to use a flashlight, right? The other thing I use a flashlight for is it has a very great setting, which is one of those pulsating light settings. And that is my self-defense tool, right? I don't want to get into a fight. I may know how to fight, but I don't want to get into a fight. Nobody wants to get into a fight. And if I can avoid it, everything I will. But if I need to zap somebody, some arsehole on the street in the face with a flashing, blinding light so that they're total disorientated so I can get around them and get out of there, then I got that tool. I'm not going to hit anybody with it. I'm just going to stick it right in your face, and it's going to be a blinding, pulsating light that is going to totally disorient you, and you have no idea where I am. And by the time your eyes dilate back down, I'm 100 meters down the road at full sprint, bud. I'm gone. You lose. I win every time. Right? So my EDC is very, very simple from that perspective, right? So you got to go through the scope. Now, if you are female or you are somebody that is concerned about your personal safety, there are a whole bunch of other measures that you can take. We have a week of the practical preparedness at the end talking about personal safety and fighting. We'll leave it for that, but in the interim, when you're local, that's really all you got to worry about. Now, interstate travel. This is something that I'm doing in a short order. I'm getting on the road and getting on Via Rail, which is our national rail service here in Canada. I'm going to go for an 8-hour train ride to a really cool place. and I'm going to spend a week there, right? So because I'm doing that, I have practical applications because I'm not walking home because the location I'm going to is some 700 kilometers from my home, right? So that's about 450 miles, my friends. I am not walking that home unless I absolutely have to, right? So now I have to consider if the shizzy hits the fizzy and the world goes pear-shaped, I have to shelter in location. I know where I'm going. I'm going to stay with a member of my family. Does the member of my family have the appropriate level of resources to be able to provide me my 6 animalistic requirements of food, water, shelter, health, safety, and security in the location for up to 14 days, right? And we know why we choose 14 days here inside My Canoehead. It's based upon research and a 94% restoration rate of critical infrastructure after a failure. There's a whole episode on that if you're interested in understanding why 14 days is the appropriate planning figure for urban and suburban environments. It's not a guess. It's actually based on evidence and research. And it's not 15 and it's not 13. It's actually 14. So I have to assess that, right? That's my responsibility. It doesn't cost any money. I know who they are, obviously. They're a member of the family. Quick, short little discussion. What do you got? Boom, bang, boom. Okay, no problem. Now, if they couldn't, or if there was something I believed that they were going to fall short on my expectations, then we just created something called a preparedness gap. So I have identified between my need and the resources that'll be available to me in this interstate travel that there is a gap. Now I have something to fill. My EDC that I take with me on my interstate travel is to fill that gap. Now I'll carry my knife and I'll carry my flashlight because that's just what I do, because that's my regular EDC. But I fill that gap, and there's a couple of things where I'm going that they're going to be a little short on, and I don't expect them to take a bunch of measures because as much as I live the world of preparedness, not everybody in my family does. So you do what you can, and then people will make the choices they do, right? So fair enough. I have that stuff, and I take it with me, right? It just goes into my carry-on on the train. Life is good. Everything's fine. If there's a significant disruption down there, I know how the whole thing matters. But the one other consideration that I do look at is if there is a significant disruption, how do I get home? How do I get home if normal plans don't happen? So if something happens to Via Rail, say I'm in the States, I'm on an Amtrak trip to go see family. Amtrak is no longer available. Doesn't matter why. Don't care, right? How am I going to get home? Well, obviously there's plane travel. What's that look like? What's a car hire looks like, as the British like to say? Rental car for us North Americans. Yeah, I'm not going to get an e-bike and try to e-bike 700 kilometers or bicycle 700 kilometers. That's the end of the world crap. But what I do is then I take the time to understand what that looks like, right? How much is it going to cost from where I'm going for a one-way plane ticket home if I have to get home because Via Rail just stops working, or a bus? Like, I look at all of that. I do a quick scan of it. It takes about 10 minutes on the internet. I now understand what the risk profile is by choosing to make this interstate travel. I understand, do I have the appropriate amount of money? Because imagine if I did take the train and I got trapped at the location because the train was no longer available and I didn't have enough money to pay for that plane ticket home, or to pay for a bus ticket home, or to pay for a rental ticket home. I've now set myself up for absolute failure because I can't get home. Now I'm dependent on somebody else footing the bill for me. That is the antithesis of preparedness, right? It's not the government's responsibility to save me. It's mine. I am personally responsible for my outcomes. So if I did not have the ability to pay for the alternate way home at the cheapest low rate, which is just a bus ride, right? Then I'm not going on the trip. That's me. You don't have to go to that extreme, but that's the level of preparedness I go to. So that just covers your interstate travel, right? It's no big deal. We're not talking apocalypse here. Now, I want to jump in because I know there's a couple of people in the back seats that I'm going to be a little bit louder for. they're saying, well, what happens if the apocalypse and society collapse while you're there, right? This is an individual that wants me to carry a bug out bag to be able to build bushcraft shelters and make fires and live off the land while I'm going from one urban center to another in a modern, technologically enabled society. Yeah, not worried about that, bud. Society's not collapsing. I'm sorry if that's something you think is logically potentially going to come, but it is not. The world is a chaotic place. The 2020s are the most chaotic decade we've had since the 1940s, for very good reason if you understand human history, why the 2020s had to be the decade that we're going through right now and will continue to be disruptive until about 2031, 32, when we will emerge with the world restructured, ordered, with the certain powers being what they may. So humanity's going through a reorganization. Society's not collapsing. I'm sorry, Chicken Little. It's not going to happen for you. Some people want that because they've spent, $20,000 on bunkers and all this stuff in their basement, and they're desperately waiting for society to collapse. And the pandemic almost gave it to them, and they were disappointed that this was not the apocalypse they had prepared for or wanted. So that being said, funny enough, I don't worry about societal collapse. I worried about shelter in place at my interstate location. If they can't provide for me, then I make sure I can help them out providing for me. And then I know in 14 days, society will be restored. I can jump on that alternate mode of transportation and go home. Okay, no problem. The last part is international travel, and this adds a whole bunch of series of additional complexities. Obviously, you're going to look at alternate locate. You're going to look at how do I get home. So, for example, and 9/11 was a good example of what happened. Now, I don't expect another 9/11 attack, but think about the international airlines. And think about the catastrophic difficulty we had in the 3 to 4 months following 9/11, trying to secure airports, trying to secure airlines. Imagine if you were caught overseas in Bali. An associate of mine is headed off to Indonesia. I wish him the best on a 30-day trip. I am utterly jealous. But if airlines shut down for any number of reasons, how would that individual get home? What's their plan? Now, it could take months for a new airline ticket to be made available. There's not a lot of international boat travel. How do you get a tuk-tuk to drive you, 7,000 kilometers over land to get to Western Europe? I mean, you can think through that process to the greatest extent possible, but the logical outcome is when you travel internationally, especially if you leave North America and you go somewhere else, you are going to be sheltering in place until whatever service got you there is restored. That is the rationale real. So your thought process is based upon how are you going to shelter in place long term up to 14 days at the location you've chosen to travel to and provide for your 6 animalistic requirements. Again, food, water, shelter, health, safety, and security. How are you going to do that in the international location, right? Look at what happened to the pandemic. You can't just assume that, shall we say, the restaurants will stay open or that the hotels will stay open. Nobody cares that you have a booking if the hotel closes, right? Nobody owes you a fresh new booking, right? You start to think, well, somebody has to, they close the hotel. Yeah, okay. Your booking's canceled. There's no other rooms. What's your plan? Like, it's not somebody else's job to jump in, swoop in, and give you a room when your room is canceled. This is part of travel, right? Some people look at it as the fun of travel. Some most certainly don't. Understand the local regulations where you're going. Understand the local customs of where you're going, the places, the people, and understand consular assistance. How are you going to access consular assistance from your government in a foreign nation? I'm a Canadian. I carry a Canadian passport. When I'm in the nation of Peru or Chile, or I'm in Argentina, or I'm in the United States of America, or I'm in Ireland, right? It is my responsibility to know how to get consular assistance. What phone number and what email do I need to get a hold? And it's also my responsibility to be able to access those services by ensuring that I have a working cell phone that has a data plan that works in that country, and that cell phone is properly charged, and that I have the bars of service where I am. And if I don't have bars of service, I know where to go to get them. Again, all of that costs zero money, but planning on your part before you go. So as long as I can remain connected with the consular service, get the advice of my government, advise the government that where I am, and seek whatever assistance they can provide. I understand the local regulations and customs of the nation that I've had the privilege to travel into. And remember, entering another country is a privilege, right? Nobody has to give you access to another country. I remind myself that every time I have the privilege of crossing the border into the United States of America, and I do it fairly frequently. I only live about less than 100 kilometers from the U.S. border. Folks in New York State are great. Love them to death. They're wonderful. I travel to Ocean City, Maryland, Florida. I love the United States of America, but it's a privilege. I do not have a right to enter the U.S. of A. simply because I'm a human. I'm a Canadian. We have agreements. I have a passport. But it's a privilege to enter another country. And so when I enter another country, it is my responsibility to behave according to the local customs, to understand the local customs, and then to understand through that lens and framework how I'm going to get the support I need if everything goes sideways. And the last thing is to consider medical insurance benefits like that, because here's the deal. This can sink you because not only a lot of money, but some nations you don't get to leave until the bill is paid, right? There's none of this, I'm getting on a plane, send me a bill, and we'll fight in court. No. There's some nations in this world, and a lot more than you think, that simply will not let you leave the country until that medical bill is paid. And if you're facing a $250,000 US dollar medical bill and you didn't have insurance, there are countries that you will just sit there and guess what? They will seize your passport. You can't leave the country. You may say they're not allowed to do that. Well, guess what, my friends? It's a privilege to be in somebody else's country, and it's not up to you to like, agree with, or support the rules that they have. You have to follow them. So just be aware of local customs. Be aware of how you'll pay large medical bills through insurance, etc. Basically, the preparations you take for international travel are a hell of a lot more than sitting down and finding your Expedia.com, lastminute.com, selloffvacations.com trip, grab your passport and your bathing suit and go. There's a whole other thing if you want to adopt a prepared life. So we could carry on for hours and hours about all the different considerations you have, but hopefully today, this little review of the first 5 weeks of the 10 weeks of practical preparedness, and then talking about local, interstate, and international travel, you see that everything that I talked about was free of charge. It was all about taking the extra time and effort to walk through the possible things that could occur to you while you're away from home, and then how do you get back to home immediately or in fullness of time and support yourself in location. Remember, while other people are friendly and humanity is wonderful, it is not somebody else's responsibility to take care of you when you are away from home. That is your responsibility to ensure that you will be able to do that in your home city, on interstate travel, or on the other side of the world. You need to figure out how to do that. You need to plan for it. It doesn't take long. It's not difficult. It just takes time and a bit of effort. So thanks again for joining us this week at Inside My Canoe Head. Drop over to our website. Leave us a little good, bad, or indifferent review. If you like what you hear at Inside My Canoe Head, drop over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts. Give us a thumbs up. Give us a review. If you think there's something here that you would love to see, hear, or feel, drop us a line. We'd be happy to build an episode for you. Whatever you want to make it look for. Believe it or not, we've had a couple of people say, hey, I'd love an episode on this, and bang, a couple of weeks later, it was live. So thanks again for taking the time out of your day and selecting us to listen to. Thank you once again. Take care. Stay safe.